So now we can pass to the following speaker, and Paul Bonnetblanc and Jean-Charles is going to.
It's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Paul Bonnetblanc. So as you can see on the slides, Paul is a policy officer for geothermal energy and carbon capture in the French Ministry of an Ecological and Solidarity Transition. So in his function, he acts actually as a focal point for geothermal energy and carbon capture and underground storage issues within the French Ministry. Paul is particularly involved in the innovation, research and development programs, and participates at several international initiatives at the European level and international level, including the Global Geothermal Alliance, coordinated by ARENA, and what was launched at the COP21. So I think I can leave now the digital floor to Paul.
So first of all, I want to apologize because I had to put everything into some kind of urgency, and there will not be many colors in my slides, but I want to make let's say a special arrangement to what we usually say, because let's say now, and especially in this time of COVID-19, probably the macroeconomics of public policy involved in this will probably change some of the parameters. So what I want to show now is how we work. As you see in my bio, I was working in more in private companies so far, and I've been in the ministry the last 4 years. So I tried to convey about the how it's working at the public policy level in France and the EU. So we basically starting, and probably like big companies, from strategic plans, and from this we divert some public funding to achieve the targets. And this is the breakdown of my presentation. And of course, I will focus, because we are talking about geoscience today, a little bit on the subsurface, and just so you have some of maybe not the flavor, but like I said, because public policy might change, but how you can interfere with public policy. What you think about it also, as my position is more on innovation, so I won't talk too much about public policy in general, and rather at the innovation. Talking about national and EU strategic plans, lately there was at EU level, but also at the national level, the clean energy transition that moved to carbon neutrality, and through some strategic communication like the Clean Energy Transition for All, and also a paper that address what should be financed to reach carbon neutrality, and what green finance should do to have everything in place by 2050, and that's called taxonomy. At the national level, we have 5 to 10 years plan. I mean, the strategic spans for 10 years, but we are updating this every 5 years. So we have on one hand the national strategy for the low carbon, which is, I will refer later as SNBC, and also the PPE, which is the national energy roadmap, which, let's say, is supposed to be issued these days, but is planning taking 0 point at 2018, and should set some objective for 2023, for 5 years, and for 10 years to 2028. Talking about a little bit France, about our strategy for low carbon. We have, as you might have heard, some carbon budget. So we have a trend and we try to square into a box for different period of time. So again, you see the specific periods every 5 years that has been revised, and different emitters like agriculture and industry, energy and manufacturing industry, transports. Below zero, you will have some negative emissions, like well, basically what we call carbon sinks. One is the effect of managing, well, say a better agriculture and also forest to store CO2, and the other one that's probably more of interest for today, carbon capture and storage. Of course, this is French exercise. We all have this in Europe, and if you make a consolidation, you will have the EU let's say business plan for the low carbon. Looking at the situation of 2050, on the left-hand side, you have remaining greenhouse gas emissions, and on the right-hand side, carbon sinks. Just to pinpoint that at some extent, if we do what we can do as we have high expectation on energy efficiency and other things, you will have still GHG emissions for a certain amount, like agriculture, and also transportation in some way. But you see the second one is industry. On the right-hand side, the current situation, this is basically a snapshot. We anticipate that we'll be able to use carbon capture and storage to the amount of 10 to 15 million ton of CO2 stored in France in 2050. This for the exercise, we don't tell what's happening before, and we don't say what's happening after, because it would be too complicated. The role of CCS in this, it's rather long term. It's in our scenario, and what we want to achieve with this is to store CO2 from industries that's where CO2 is emitted not as producing energy, electricity, or byproduct. It's like, for instance, cement and steel, where some chemists, some industries, chemistry, where CO2 is a byproduct of chemical reactions. And on the other side, as we have to do, like I show you 2 slides before, we have to achieve some negative emissions. So we have to, let's say, basically burn biomass and then store CO2. And that's the exercise for us, for France. Now, we know that if we do business as usual, I mean, that would be the cheapest options. So basically burning, using fossil fuels. So public funding is, of course, aiming at reducing the energy intensity, carbon intensity, but also we have many plans for innovation, because we have to bring down the cost of, first, as you can understand, renewable energy, and also some specific process innovation within process of specific industry, carbon intensive industries. We have 2, let's say, tools here. One is the EU, at the EU level, is the SET plan, the Strategic Energy Technology Plan. I will refer later. And our national one, Stratégie Nationale Recherche Énergétique, which is a roadmap And I will more concentrate on the EU one. The EU one has several things that address opportunities for subsurface. First one is, as you see on top, number one in renewables. That's where sits geothermal energy, shallow and deep. You have also heat storage, and you have also energy storage as a whole. A little bit also as energy efficiency system, as you see in 5 and 6. You have, of course, carbon capture, utilization, and storage on number 9. So these are working group currently active that set some key priorities at the EU level, which means that they are setting priorities for research. So the working group has member states members and industry members and research also organization with it. So let's say we are not having a discussion just with member states only or just researchers. We try to focus on a single goal within these 3, I would say, pillars. Focusing on the subsurface, I want just to highlight 2 working group, implementation working groups within the set plan. I'm participating. One is the carbon capture and storage, led by Norway and the Netherlands. We are just and the implementation working group on the deep geothermal, which basically, like I said, design future research priorities. Then when we set priorities, we have different funds and schemes. Well, I would say there is basic research. There are, let's say, demo project and pre-commercial projects. Here, just for the sake of the presentation, I want just to highlight one scheme. But if you look at EU level, we have a new program. Maybe some of you know EAGE 2020. The successor will be Horizon Europe. Is currently being defined and designed. There will be the Innovation Fund. I will talk briefly to end this presentation later. And the national level, we have several, like I said, different TRL level, technology readiness level, to address basic research by the ANR, medium ADEM, and then for pre-commercial or demo project, some institutional bank, the BPI, and our national program for investment for future, PEA3, which more concerns higher TRL or pre-commercial demonstration projects. Then innovation fund innovation. This is very particular because it is one of the best one to finance pre-commercial and specifically address CCS, but also any low carbon investment in the member states at industrial level. So for instance, we are talking about in Norway, the project, some of you might know the Northern Lights one, which is a full-scale demo project for CCS from emitters probably around Europe, around the North Sea. This is very particular because it is set aside from any state aid rules. So you can combine state aid rules with this innovation fund. You can go up to 70% of eligible cost coming from innovation. So let's say, basically, if you have to think about it, any project that will be awarded by Innovation Fund will receive special attention from the EU. And most probably, that might be for the next decade, one of the backbone of even European and national investment for low carbon technologies.
Thank you very much, Paul. Are there any questions? You can write them in the chat as before.
Well, I will have difficulties to say how much GDP because, like I said in the introduction, I really have hands on the innovations. So that means innovation is not, and by much is not a lot. There are other measures like investment support that does not involve innovation. It's just, for instance, if in France we have Fonds Chaleur, which is funding some geothermal or geothermal as in general, and that try to make it competitive against gas heater as a comparison. So there are all these. I think the GDP is quite important. I mean, we have now the Green Deal, so I think that's kind of a priority. I would say, just because as myself, as a personal view, I think also, you know, just 4 months ago, health maybe was not so much a concern. So when you're talking about GDP, we have to reflect on what is just happening and breaking industries with the COVID-19, I mean. So probably that's why I not wanted to make too much, put too much figures on that.
And can you please read the questions? The next question is, because we are recording, what is the role of hydrogen in the French strategy and CCS in the context decarbonization of blue hydrogen?
Yeah, there is for everybody, and maybe around the table, some people know, we sometimes are talking about blue hydrogen, which is the common hydrogen produced from natural gas, and then you store CO2 by CCS. And also green hydrogen, which is the one from electrolysis. The problem is, let's say, we would prefer, in general, that we produce hydrogen from electrolyzer, but of course, it's more expensive. So let's say this is not a final advice. I mean, not advice, a final view on this, but I would say more, maybe not so much on the French strategy. In fact, in French strategy, hydrogen plays a role in, let's say, in end user. We want to reduce emission for transportation, especially in big cities, and I think that's also a goal. But let's say we are also on the public side trying to make a fair competition or at least a competition that makes solution more and more close to the market. So for this, hydrogen is a key for France. Maybe more on the electrolysis from electrolysis side, but at the same time we will see what's happening also on electrification to extend the thing. Okay, in low price on oil market, well, it's not so much. Probably oil market is hurting a lot some scheme. We try to build some scheme. We see that especially in geothermal heat, it's a bit tricky. That will probably, but I think at the EU level we are some kind of protected from that. In some other countries, I believe it might be difficult. But prior to the current situation, I would say there is a general consensus on what we should really reduce the carbon footprint. So let's say the government will manage to, let's say, to increase and more the pressure as a whole. Okay, a very specific question to the French electricity feed-in tariff. Okay, I'm the geothermal energy policy officer, so I took part of a year-long discussion with the feed-in tariff in the mainland France. What we say officially and everything, that our ministry is a bit sorry about the situation, as we know that very much that especially this industry needs a long-term perspective to develop. But what I can say also is also what was the purpose of my presentation, is compared to maybe 5 years ago, we are really trying. I mean, we as the government and the Ministry of Economy is also trying to solve the climate change and reduce and make the transition at the least cost possible. Which means that in the case of geothermal power, well, when it's 5 times more than wind, even though it's intermittent, and solar, well, the figures does not look too good. So there was that debate just started well a year ago when we've drawn up the national strategy.
Okay.
Well, this is new, but I think this is very important now, and that's why innovation is more and more important. I know it's a bit difficult, especially in geoscience. I mean, yeah, some in the industry we are. I mean, the industry is have a high level of expertise, using the best available technique, but for geoscience applicable to energy transition, it has to be, there will be some help from government, but at the same time we have, and it's a bit difficult, but the curve of it has to be really reduced. Let's say, just to give you just a picture, we cannot afford to drill too deep, for instance, because the cost of levelized cost of electricity, for instance, would be too high. So we really have, for all geoscience involved into or subsurface involved into the energy transition, we have really to have a benchmark with other way of producing electricity or other processes. That's my advice to the industry.
Thank you very much, Paul. And we can move now to the next speaker, Laurent Jam. What role for society in the energy transition, social governance for the subsurface industry, and Giovanni will present Laurent.